Ofsted came, and it was the most brutal, destructive, unhelpful experience that you could ever imagine. Every horror story that you have read about Ofsted, including the poor experience that Ruth Perry had, that that was our experience. The inspector was cold, she was unkind.
Hello, my name's Jenna. I'm an online primary tutor. Today I'm talking to Emily, who was a head teacher who quit teaching to start up her own business. If you are a head teacher or an ex-head teacher, let me know in the comments and tell me what you are up to now that you have left the profession. Thank you very much for joining me, Emily.
Hi, thank you.
So we came across each other on Facebook. You very kindly got in touch. Now, before we go into, what really happened with your story, with your journey, often we see a lot about head teachers in the press and social media and that kind of thing, but I don't really think, unless you work in a school, you know what a head teacher is and what they do and what they are responsible for. So let's start off. What is a head teacher?
Well, firstly, I don't think the role of a head teacher can be summarised as a generic role, because I think it's very dependent on the size of your school, where your school is. So I can talk about my perspective, but I do agree with you. I think it's a bit of an unrecognised profession sometimes. And actually, even as a teacher, I think I often used to wonder what on earth was happening behind that closed door, and sort of thought, why do they spend all their day in the office? And actually, once I was in that position, thought, oh, if only I could spend all day in the office. So I was a head teacher of a 4-class primary school. So a very, very small setting, which meant that I really did do every aspect of the role that you could imagine of a head teacher. So that's managing finances. I was in charge of health and safety, in charge of the staff teams. That's down to staffing structures, to pay, HR issues. You name it, I have done it. But I suppose in a nutshell, the head teacher is the operational manager and strategic lead of the school.
And was it always part of your plan to become a head teacher?
No way. I'd always wanted to be a teacher, literally from the time I was probably about 3. I was an absolute teacher observer, teacher obsessor. I would go home and pretend to be a teacher with a cup of milk in my mum's clip-clop shoes, shouting at children on the patio, James Brown, put that skipping rope down, that sort of thing. Every book I read had bookmarks with children's names on them in there, that sort of thing. But never ever did I think that I would want to progress. Never. My dream was to be a teacher, and that was it. That was as far as it went.
So then, when you did make that step to become a head teacher, how does it work? What did you have to do? What was the process of becoming a head teacher?
I think there's kind of a personal process, and then there is the actual career progression. So I think the personal process was that I think when you are in any organization, you start to reach the point where you've got enough experience that you're quite frustrated by some of the decisions being made. I think lots of people will recognize that, no matter whether that's being a teacher or in a different profession, where you start to kind of look at the people above you and you think, I wouldn't have done that, or I've got a better idea for that. And so I'd reached the point in my career. I suppose I'd maybe been teaching 15 years, I think. And I just found myself very naturally stepping up for responsibility. So, curriculum lead, I then went into year 6. And yeah, I was just getting a bit frustrated. My head teacher at the time recognised that and put me on the NPQSL, which is the national profession, which is a national professional qualification of senior leadership. And it was a really, really pivotal moment, because I suddenly realised I was with all these other people, some of whom were already deputy heads. And I kind of thought, yeah, I feel really comfortable here, and I've got lots of really good ideas, and I'm very happy to put my money where my mouth is. So I applied for a deputy headship after completing that course. which incidentally was the school I ended up being head in. Got the deputy headship. And I think the upside of a small school, but equally the downside, is that you get to know everything very, very quickly, because you actually have, in a way, so much more responsibility than someone in a larger school. So I was, as deputy, curriculum lead, RE lead, English lead, deputy designated safeguarding person, the trips, evolve trips and trips coordinator. The role is just so vast because there isn't anybody else to share it with. So I think the learning curve was huge. And within 2.5 years of being a deputy head, I was head teacher because the head had left. So I think there's that real personal journey, but then there is also that how your career has progressed and how you've been taken to that moment.
That's really interesting. You say that you kind of got frustrated, because I used to hear about a lot of teachers, whatever role they were in, they'd want to move to that next step to be able to make the changes. So how then do the head teachers have to do an interview? Do they have to do an observation? Do they have to do an assembly to get that role? What is that look like practically?
Yeah, so the job came up. So I'd been the deputy now, like I say, for 2.5 years. And then we had a bit of a management restructure, and the head became executive head of our school. He worked 3 days a week, and my role changed. I was head of school, which actually is, I think, was my ideal job, because actually the executive head was still in charge of things like finance, those kind of more strategic aspects. And I was the operational lead, which was almost like the traditional role of a head teacher. So organising the rotas, doing monitoring, that really hands-on part of the job. Well, he then left and the job came up. And by now I'd just got so much experience in those shoes that I felt I'm ready, I want to apply, even though it was very early, really, in my career as a senior leader. So the job was advertised, and I had to write my application against the job spec, just like everybody else. It was advertised externally. And actually, it's the only job in a school that you have to advertise externally. So even if you really are quite certain that somebody's going to get it who's an internal candidate, it has to be an external advert. So I think they had about 5 applicants for the job. 2 of us were then taken through to interview, and actually she dropped out before the interview, but it didn't make it any less pressure, because I did know they will not employ somebody if you're not the right person for the job. So it was a day-long interview, which generally they're actually 2, but there was only me as one candidate. So yeah, I had to do a collective worship. It was a church school. I had an in-tray exercise, which is where a number of scenarios are written down, and then you have to rank which ones you would deal with first, what you're going to do about them, which ones you would delegate. I think I had a budgeting exercise as well, and definitely a data analysis task. And then there was a long formal interview as well. So I remember just ending the day with the biggest headache. Oh, and there was a prepared presentation as well about how are you going to make this school outstanding, or some open question like that. So yeah, I mean, the most intense day, and the panel is huge. I think there was about 8 people on the panel, because you've got people from the local authority, the diocese, and then a selection of governors. And yeah, it was a really intense day.
I think that reflects the job, like
Yeah,
how big the job is, because there's so many people involved in deciding who is
very
going to
true.
lead a school. Because at the end of the day, whatever goes wrong in a school, if it's Ofsted and you don't
Well,
get the right results, often it's the head teacher that goes first. And I saw that with some of the schools I worked in, unfortunately. And I don't necessarily think it's right, because it doesn't really give the head teacher a chance to improve or anything like that. But that's a whole other
Yeah, whole
story.
other story. Yeah, but
Whole other
I think you're
story.
right. No, I think you're right. And actually, interestingly enough, when I now look back on the interview, I think I can't believe I thought that was hard, because compared to everything else, you're right, actually that's nothing. It's just a
Mm,
very one intense day. But I think the pressure you feel, because you feel you've got this one chance to show yourself off. And
mm,
I wanted the job so badly. I'd cultivated this team of staff. They were a true team, a true bunch of friends. We had such love for each other, and I'd fostered that energy there. And I thought, if I don't get this, I feel I've let them down as much as myself. And could I stay if I hadn't got the job? So yeah,
mm.
that from that perspective, I think it felt like a lot of pressure.
That's interesting that because you'd already worked at the school, that
Mm,
you stayed with that group, because often, sometimes, teachers will notice when they go from a teacher to a middle leader to a senior leader in the same school, it
mm,
can be quite difficult
yeah,
because, you know, your relationship changes. But that's good that you're able to create a group that you felt comfortable you could
yeah,
move up to that next step.
yeah,
Because over the years, some colleagues I worked with, and even myself, like when I went up to like a middle leader role
mhm,
in terms of a subject, and staff do treat you differently
yeah.
sometimes
And
because
and I do
also,
think, again, I think maybe that's the upside of a small school, because you don't really have groups in a small school. There were 4 teachers. I think at that time maybe we had 3 TAs, 1 office manager. That was the team, and the cook, the caretaker, everybody. We were so much part of the team, because there weren't those kind of breakaway factions that I've experienced in bigger
mm,
schools. Um, and I mean, yeah, to give myself some credit, I think I definitely built that team, and I think they always knew that they didn't kind of need to vie for your attention. They knew I respected them. Whereas, yeah, I've worked in schools where there's kind of cliques and a bit of unease because people are trying to please the head teacher and trying to get in. Whereas
mm.
actually everybody in that school had responsibility. Nobody was trying to climb to be a subject lead, because everybody had to be a subject leader, because there wasn't anyone else to share it with. So yeah, it made for a really, I think, a really lovely equal dynamic.
It's a little bit of an offshoot topic, but
That's all
there
right.
was a job advert that came up recently. I don't know if you saw it, and it was like in a Scottish school in like this tiny island, and everyone was like, "Oh, that's so amazing to do
Yeah.
like that job." And then I did a video about it on my social media, and I was like, "Well, think of all the responsibility.
True.
If it's
Yeah,
just
it's
you in the
absolutely
head,
true.
it's
Yeah,
a
it's
lot of
absolutely true.
work."
I've been in a so I've been, I mean, again, this will come back to this, but I've been in a 2-class school today, um,
Wow.
teaching music, and the pressure for the poor head teacher who does not have the staff to delegate to. There isn't anybody. So actually the amount of stuff that you are carrying is huge. You've still got the same number of policies to write, for example. You've still got the same number of governors meetings. Everything is the same. The expectation is the same, but you have literally got barely anybody else to do it but yourself.
I never realised that actually. That's
Yeah,
like, no, I
it's
never realised
crazy.
that.
Yeah.
So going back to your journey then,
Mhm.
when you first got the job, obviously I imagine you were really pleased, you'd worked so hard to get to that point at the beginning of your career. Because how long were you a head teacher for in
6 years.
total?
Yeah, 6 years.
So in the beginning, what was the job like?
So I got the job, Easter 2015. Yeah, Easter 2015, so I started the September. Oh, no, that was my deputy headship, I lie. Sorry, September
Mhm.
2018, I became head teacher. And do you know what? I truly, truly loved it. It just catered for everything that I am. I love having tons of things on the go. I love having to solve problems. I love having to work at a million miles an hour. And I loved it that it was a small school, because it meant I could have a finger in every pie. I was just doing everything. Um, my husband once came to do supply. He's a secondary teacher, and he came and did some supply, and he said, Emily, it is a bit weird because I saw you putting up a display and I saw you out doing a playground duty and I saw you doing this sort of duty. And he said, just think about it. He said, sometimes your staff just need you to be a rock. But of course, he was viewing it as how a secondary head would be. And I said, but Daniel, that's what I love about it. I love the relieving the staff of their burdens and thinking, well, who else is going to empty the dishwasher? I will do that for them. But I was just thriving on it. I was doing so much and coming up with all these plans. I was, did a really good job of community cohesion. I was kind of putting lots of links back into the community. And yeah, I would say, yeah, I just absolutely loved it. And I was exhausted all the time, but in that real, I'm really satisfied. I loved having the power to make those decisions. So, all of those things that you used to hate as a teacher. So, for example, book scrutiny. My heart would sink, right? Everybody bring your books to a staff meeting. Well, everything like that, I now had the chance to think, right, actually, what is effective? What is fair? What is this for? And I loved trying to come up with better ways of doing things that were highly impactful, but really fair for the staff and their workload, because I knew how that felt. So yeah, those kind of early days, and I would say probably for the first 2 years, I just absolutely loved the job and I felt nothing but a buzz from it, really. Yeah.
Just a quick question. How did you make the book scrutinies better? Because I used to instill
Yeah.
fear in me.
Yeah.
Honestly, I'd be like, ooh. And
Yeah.
I think it's just the fact that the whole staff would be there and you'd
Yeah.
have to be critiqued in front of everybody.
Yeah.
It's like, please let my books be okay. Please let my books be
Yeah.
okay.
And it was
Please.
just things like that. It was, and I'd experienced exactly the same thing where you were given a feedback sheet and everybody could see the feedback on there. But firstly, I really thought about what is the purpose of them. And then they were just really done in a very friendly, we're helping each other way. So often we would all come to a staff meeting and actually people would scrutinize their own books against a set of criteria. So
Oh,
they'd maybe
okay.
maybe they would sit with their TA and they'd go through their books together to go, oh yeah, actually we haven't been doing that and we should have set it out like that. But then also some of those kind of non-negotiables, I took them away because I just thought, I don't know what the point of them is. I don't get it. I don't really care if every single book has got the date underlined or not. I want them to look high quality. But if class 4 are underlining and class 3 aren't, is that really going to have any impact on the children's learning? No. So it was just things like that I just thought, this is common sense. And I think so many things that are done in schools are because teachers are treated like children. I think it's like a playground mentality where, right, we have to do these tick box exercises. I've heard of schools who've got really strict non-negotiables, or they've got a really strict uniform policy for staff. And I just think we're actually adults and I want the staff to be doing the job well because they want to impact well on the children, not because they're frightened of getting it wrong for me. It's just not what it's about. So yeah, just like that, really.
That's lovely, really, because I do have friends that are still teaching and they have to change all the resources because they want all the PowerPoints to be in line with the academy.
Yeah.
And surely they can use their time a lot better than going back
Mm.
through hours and hours of
Yeah.
resources that they may, using hours of their time to go back through that.
Agree.
But so after that first 2 years,
Mhm.
what kind of then changed? How did it progress?
COVID was the first thing.
Oh, okay.
I think just I often feel like you carry a backpack round and everybody's got kind of stressors in their backpack. So, it's literally your kind of physical burdens on your back, isn't it? And that might be that your washing machine has broken, you've had a row with your partner, you might be worried about a parent's health, or do you know what I mean? All of those, everybody's got that. And then I think work obviously keeps adding to that backpack, and that gets heavier. And I think COVID was so strange because I think some of the stresses were things that I didn't even recognize as stresses at the time. I kind of went into this cheerful CBeebies presenter mode, sort of putting out the positive face for staff, putting out the positive face for children, for parents. But actually, everybody was carrying their own fears about COVID and their own uncertainties about that whole situation. And actually, all the while we were in lockdown, I didn't really mind that part of it. I actually managed quite well. And all of that sort of, again, I went into this role where I was quite enjoying being the decision maker. But there just came this real turning point for me. And it was the announcement came that schools are going to reopen. And the first thing I think that added to that backpack was we all heard that, sat in front of the news exactly like everybody else did. And I couldn't believe that the DfE hadn't at least emailed head teachers a week before to say, we're going to be opening schools next week.
So you had no idea?
Absolutely nothing. So then you've got parents, teachers, everybody looking to you as, well, what's that going to be like? And you're thinking, I don't know, because I literally heard it on the news just like you did. And I think when you are in a position where you're in authority, people are looking to you to be decisive and keep them safe. It was just the most unnerving period. And then when finally we'd got all our risk assessments and things, and we didn't belong to a MAT, so we had got some things coming through from the local authority, but you literally had to design lockdown learning yourself, health and safety measures yourself. You had to go in and risk assess your school yourself. And then I think it was the end of June, the unions said that if anybody died of COVID as a result of staff being taken back to school and you hadn't put the right health and safety measures in place, that the head teacher would be personally sued for that event. And it's weird. Everybody who was a head teacher had that message, but for some reason, and I think it's because I'm such a people pleaser and I fear people judging me badly, it completely knocked me sideways. And I started to struggle with really bad anxiety. I got really depressed. But then in typical head teacher style, and I think in typical teacher style, we opened school and I was going in and putting on this really cheerful face. And I can remember the end of the year came and I've still got it. There was this lovely card from a parent and she said, we've all felt so safe led by you through all of this. And she said, but I do wonder, are you the proverbial swan where you look serene and your feet are going like the clappers under the surface? And I just thought, yeah, inside I'm actually really broken and I'm not coping very well. And it was just that weight of responsibility. It was the first time I'd really thought, oh my God, I am truly captain of this ship and this weighs really heavy. I've literally got lives in my hands here. And yeah, it just hit really hard. And I think ever after that, I don't think that you felt you ever had let up again. I never had those lovely 2 years that I'd had where I was firing on all cylinders, putting new things in, doing this, doing that. That carried on, but there were cracks. There were too many cracks. So yeah, that was definitely the first tipping point for me where the job started to just weigh very, very heavy. Yeah.
That's a massive responsibility to put onto the shoulders of one person.
Yeah.
Like that's just, and like COVID was such a scary time. So to put that onto somebody and say you are responsible for this if this happens, and you're trying to lead a school and lead staff and parents and governors and Like,
And you just sort of felt like you had the whole community looking to you, you know. And
mm,
then there was almost competition as well between schools because there wasn't a clear guidance, was there, in that first lockdown of what
no.
learning should look like. So I'd made the decision very early on, which sort of feels a bit weird now because I don't really mind all the online stuff now. But like things like Zoom, it still felt very new, didn't it? I'd never
Mm,
even heard of Zoom till COVID. So I'd made the decision that we were not going to do live lessons because actually loads of our parents were trying to juggle work at home. The children were very young. Plus, because we had mixed year group classes, it we were just thinking, well, if you've got, say, one laptop at home, how do you do that anyway? If all your children are meant to be doing online learning, they can't then all have a laptop to access it. So we tried to keep it quite low key, and we were uploading timetables and uploading all the worksheets and activities and links to websites. So we tried to keep it. I tried to keep the staff workload fair because many of them had their children at home as well. But I did feel, again, we were getting this feedback sometimes from parents saying, well, the school down the road are doing live lessons and we really want live lessons. And, for the first time, I felt like, you're not going to please everybody here
no.
because it's starting to get these gripes of what would suit one doesn't suit another. And yeah, it was just sort of the first time I felt very, very vulnerable in my position, just kind of very exposed. And yeah, that was just really, really hard to take.
That's interesting that you had parents asking for the live lessons, because in my experience, I'm now online
Mm,
tutoring. A lot of Initially in the beginning, after lockdown, a lot of families would not touch online learning at all because they were
yeah.
traumatized by it. They were
Mm,
really, really traumatized by it. So it really shocks me that parents were asking for it.
mm,
Because I did like trial lessons with families, and they were fine once they tried it. But
yeah.
initially they were so like, oh no, online learning lockdown was
Interesting.
terrible, was
Mm.
really, really terrible. So I suppose as well as a head teacher, it's so hard because you've got so many plates to spin. So
And
you
so
are
many
having,
opinions, yeah, and lots of opinions, I think, because you've got your staff voicing opinions, you've got your parents voicing opinions, you've got your governors voicing opinions, the local authority, you've got Ofsted looming, and it's just kind of at all angles. And as I said, I'm a real people pleaser, and I'm very, very flexible, but that sometimes has been to my detriment. I think that I listen to one opinion and then think, oh God, I really want to please that person. And that kind of feeling torn in all directions, just I found hellish, really. Yeah.
so as the time progressed, you've
Hmm.
obviously spoken about COVID. That was a
Yeah.
massive shocker to the whole world.
Yeah.
Was there anything else that shocked you or surprised you about the job?
Yeah, so we'd had like the COVID things that sort of spanned really 2 academic years, hadn't they?
Yeah.
Because we had like the 2020 and then we had 2021. And then the following year, when we came back in the September, we had just heard the announcement. So we'd been an outstanding school for 16 years. So
Oh,
they were
wow.
last, yeah, so they had last been done in 2006. And when we went back, so bear in mind, 2 years of COVID, and in the following September, Ofsted announced that the exemption rule for outstanding schools was being left. So, what that had meant in the past was schools were judged on about a 4 yearly cycle if they were a good school. They were judged more regularly if they were RI or inadequate. But outstanding schools, if your data managed to remain good and there weren't any other triggers for an Ofsted inspection, you were left alone.
Oh,
Because the assumption was, well, if your SATs outcomes are high, which ours were, we had sat in the top 10% of the country for years. And again, not it was just, yeah, we had some amazing teachers. Um, so because of that, we were left alone. But we came back in September 21, I think, and the exemption rule had been lifted. So we knew, okay, there is a possibility that Ofsted are going to come this year. And actually, I felt really good about it. I felt we're a really great school. We've got so much in place. You know, we'd done a real overhaul of the curriculum. I'd got these content cards, which were kind of like knowledge organisers. So you'd got skills and knowledge and vocabulary for every single subject, every single year group. So I was feeling really good about it. I was feeling absolutely fine. And we'd come back in the September, and I'd done like the staff meeting to say it's going to be this year. We all need to be very ready, blah, blah, blah. July that year, which nobody wants them in July, and on my bloody birthday, so the 6th of July on my birthday, Ofsted came. And it was the most brutal, destructive, unhelpful experience that you could ever imagine. Every horror story that you have read about Ofsted, including the poor experience that Ruth Perry had, that was our experience. The inspector was cold, she was unkind, she used inappropriate language to children. She allegedly asked girls, have you ever been sexually assaulted at school? There were so many issues. She was very coercive in her manner. So she would come back to me and make statements about school. So very undermining. And the whole process was brutal anyway, because as I've already explained, I was taking on so many responsibilities. So when Ofsted ring, they then give you a timetable of their day. So it says things like to meet with the designated safeguarding lead, to meet with the English lead, to meet with the person for personal development. Well, most of it was me. So the whole day, I was just in and out of this office. And I think that we definitely were a good school. We were a good school. We had had a local authority QA, which had said there are no issues here. You're at a really good school, really pleased with what we'd seen. The diocese had been in and out to us several times. And, you know, they described us as being one of those schools where you walk in and you just get the feel, you know, just those really special places. It was calm, it was orderly. Children enjoyed being there, staff enjoyed being there. And she ripped us apart. And she said that we had serious weaknesses. And it was the most devastating 2 days. I can't even explain the feeling. I mean, to say it floored me, it did literally floor me. I remember getting home and I just sat on the floor crying, and it was my birthday. It was also the worst birthday. Because it felt as though, have I been wrong? Because I thought the school looked like this, and it was almost like looking at it through a magic mirror. You know, when you look at something and now it's warped. It is what I thought it was, but you've warped it all, and it was just horrific. Anyway, when they'd then gone, we then unpicked it all and realised, well, actually, we've got grounds for a complaint here, because the way that it was conducted was horrendous. We actually found out we were only her second inspection. And by the time she'd done 4 inspections, she'd put 3 schools into serious weaknesses. I mean, those
Have they
figures,
all been outstanding?
not outstanding, but the others, one of the head teachers did ring me. And again, they were based on, yeah, they felt it was brutal. They said, yeah, we know we've got some things we could do with improving, but this is brutal. I think she struggled. I just think some people's personalities are not able to look for good. You know, it's like when you meet a stranger, some of us have got that. You assume the good in somebody first, and then you wait to be proved wrong. But I think she was the sort of person who assumed, I'm going to find something here, and then she almost went to look for it. I mean, I could honestly, the inspection I could unpick. It could be an episode in itself, because some of the stories are just completely outrageous. I mean, one of the things that will make you laugh is we are one of the only inspection reports that has the trim trail mentioned twice in it. And it was because there were two quite close together accidents, totally unrelated, just freak accidents. One was a boy had cracked his head, and another one, a girl had fell. And she just used that to say that the school was unsafe. And she referenced the trim trail in the report twice. So yeah, I think I could honestly tell you so many stories about the inspection, but I think that's actually a whole other episode. But or in conclusion, it was just the most brutal experience, I think, where you have given so much of yourself to a job. You have done things to try to make somewhere so good, and outcomes for children were absolutely incredible. You know, the children's progress and attainment that year was in the top 5% of the country. So to have this brutal inspection, it's just an absolute, it's like your world is shattered. It really is. Really is.
Yeah, I can understand that, because some schools I worked in, you'd have advisors coming in all the time
Yeah.
and talking to you, and they'd come in and they'd be really positive, just like you'd have people mark things and assess things and tell you everything was great, and then you'd suddenly get someone come in and they'd be like, no, what they've all said is wrong. There's a lot of inconsistencies, I find. You're told one thing and you do it for so long, and then the next thing, no, we don't do that anymore, that's totally wrong. And
Yeah,
that's why you're constantly coming and going in education, because you don't
absolutely.
know where you stand half the time.
Yeah, and I don't think all of those things are necessarily for the good of the children. And I think that's where I started to feel disheartened, because actually we'd already proved by our outcomes that the quality of education was really amazing. And we'd never ever narrowed our curriculum to get those SATs results. We didn't even really do revision classes, or we didn't do any boosting. We'd always had this really rounded curriculum. And so yeah, to have that all ripped to shreds was just horrendous, absolutely horrendous. But I was determined. I remember coming home and my husband said, you do have a choice. If you want to, just walk away. You don't have to see this through. But equally, how will you feel if you don't see it through? So we put in this huge complaint, which was massively time consuming. You have to sort of cross reference all of their inspection framework just to prove, you've actually not adhered to your own inspection handbook. That took masses of time. I totally didn't have any summer holiday because I was putting in place new plans, new monitoring schedules. I color coded every document in the Ofsted colours. So in their training, it's quality of education is blue, leadership and management is green. And I'd got everything was color coded so that at a glance I could go, and you see, we have safeguarding staff meetings every other week, just I think our school had been a good school, but we were not necessarily as Ofsted savvy as other schools, I think, in kind of proving that. So I made that I was determined, right, we are going to prove them wrong. So all summer, worked my socks off. The report was delayed because we'd put in this complaint. So the report didn't come out till the beginning of December. Yeah, so we had this meeting, and I had to speak at this meeting and stand up in front of, almost all parents turned up to this meeting. All my staff stayed. They all sat on this front row. And you happen to be there laying your heart bare and saying, I'm sorry I've let your children down, because that's what it feels like, and having to describe to them what you're going to do to make it better.
What was the final decision that made you decide to quit teaching?
Okay, so the story didn't end there, because Ofsted did come back. So
Okay.
yeah, so within 7 months, so they'd been in the July 22, and then March the 2nd, they came back. And I'm pretty sure that that was because we'd put in this huge complaint, because it is a very unusual timescale. They really don't do that. And they came back and they did do a full re-inspection. And we came out with good with outstanding in personal development. Now, that sounds like a really happy ending, because actually that's what we knew we were anyway. And the personal development, as you will know, That's to do with your extracurricular, your ethos, your values. Well, they were threaded through school. They have to be pretty established for you to be outstanding. So it was very obvious that those things had not been put right in 7 months. But there were several things about that final inspection that I think just killed a little bit of my like love for it and passion, and also a huge, I felt so let down by the system. The first thing is that the call came and I was actually at my dad's funeral. So my dad had died in December, and the funeral wasn't until the end of February. And on the day I was there, Ofsted rang school and said, we're going to be coming to inspect school. Now, the following day was the teacher strikes. So it gave school like this day of grace, and then they were coming the following, the day after, which is unheard of actually. But my poor staff were in absolute turmoil. I didn't even have a deputy head because that's how small we were. And my most senior teacher said on the phone to them, well, could we defer because we're in unusual circumstances? Our head teacher's at her dad's funeral. Could we defer the inspection? Which there are situations where they say yes. And they said no. And they said a school should be able to run without a head teacher. And she tried to say, well, yeah, maybe most schools, but in a small school like ours, every member of staff is vital. So we need her here. And they said, no, we will be coming the day after tomorrow. So the day after my dad's funeral, when I was like decompressing and in my pajamas and just wanting to be with my mum, the phone went and it was school. And my poor senior teacher had to say, I can't believe I've got to tell you this, but Ofsted are coming tomorrow. So I had to get dressed. My husband had gone back in the car. I was in Birmingham, so I'm trying to get back to Nottingham in my big like funeral fur coat, hot footing it on the train back. It was a bit of a double-edged sword because I do think when you're in that grief space, you can get this real fire in your belly. So actually it was quite in a weird way, a really strong position to enter into the inspection, because I kind of had this, do you know what? Life is bloody short. Also, my dad was a deputy head. So I kind of had this this is too weird, because I felt like this is my dad saying, you bloody go out there and you show them, you put this right. So we had this amazing inspection, an amazing team. They were exactly what an inspection team should be. But once we'd got that result, I'd lost that passion. I just felt this is the most ridiculous, unfair system I've ever been a part of. So the problems still kept coming. Staffing issues, very high number of SEM pupils with no funding. I had a bit of a barrage of parental complaints over children's behaviour. It just never ended. And I ended that year and we went on holiday to France, and I just felt defeated. I felt really, really defeated. And by the time I came back in September, I just hadn't got it in me anymore. I didn't feel excited to be going to school. I felt fearful driving into school for kind of this like, what is next? What is next? There was the budget was looking in a mess. Staffing structure, we weren't sure what we were going to do that. We had a pan of 15, so our pupil admission number of 15, and yet we only had 7 in reception. And it just fell one problem after another. And this isn't unique to my school. These problems will always keep coming. And all the way through the Ofsted scenario, I'd always said the serenity prayer. So I'd always felt, control the things you can, surrender to the things that you can't, and have the wisdom to know the difference. And I suddenly thought, but actually you can control this. You don't have to do the job. You don't have to be a part of it if you don't want to. And I got really low, and I just felt fear, lowness, sadness, very disconnected with the job. And so came the decision.
So for a head teacher to leave, it's quite a big process.
Yeah.
For a teacher, they have to, I think, is it 1 term notice?
Half a term.
Half term, sorry.
Mm.
So what is the process for a head teacher to quit teaching?
Yeah, so it's a term's notice, and there are particular dates that you have to give. So if you want to leave for Easter, then you need to resign by the 30th of December. If you want to leave for July, you have to resign for the end of April. And so this decision for me came at the end of September. Well, it must have been the beginning of October. So I'd missed the deadline for leaving at Christmas. I'm actually glad that I did actually miss that deadline, because it gave me time to think about where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do. And I think I'd have been panicked. I actually think if I'd have left at Christmas, I'd have ended up just applying for a job because I was panicking about the money. I think the hard thing about quitting as a head teacher, if you're not going to go into another headship, is of course it's too early to apply for another job. So, you know, if you're looking and thinking, oh, should I go in? Should I go at Christmas? If you're looking around for something to escape to, well, they're not advertised, are they, at the end of September? It's too early. You're not likely to spot something that you want to move to that far in advance when you've got such a long notice period. So I think for me, I just felt so unhappy by then that I was just willing to take that leap of faith.
And how did your staff react when you said that you were
Oh,
leaving? But that was
oh, it was awful. I feel like it sounds really big-headed, but they were really devastated. But equally, they were really pleased for me. They totally got it, and I was really honest with them about why. And yeah, they totally got it. But yeah, it was really sad.
so
Yeah.
then moving forward,
Yeah.
um, did you say you left at April?
Yeah. So literally half a term ago. Yeah.
And did you take time or did you just get on
No.
with your next step?
Yeah, so kind of probably from about Christmas, I just started to think about what might I like doing. So I started, I don't know, sort of a few weeks before I actually left, to build a bit of a Facebook page and that sort of thing. But yeah, I had one day unpaid. It was like the first Monday back, and I didn't have any work on, but I was literally straight in after Easter, straight in. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
so then
Yeah.
let's talk about your business. What's it called and what do you offer?
Okay, so it's really diverse at the moment, and I have a feeling that probably over time it will get a bit more succinct. But I really wanted to just throw myself into every single thing that I am passionate about and everything I think I'm good at. So my business is just called my name, really. It's Emily Brown, but it's Emily Brown Hearts at Educating Hearts and Minds, because that is what I am all about. I don't think you should do one without the other. And I think the education system is a lot about headspace. And actually, we're a whole body, we're a soul, we're a brain. So that's basically my common factor, I suppose. But I offer consultancy services for heads. One of my favorite offers is I will come in and be like a second head for the day, because sometimes heads just get absolutely bogged under, and you don't need someone to come and advise or someone to tell you what to do. You actually need them to take some of the things on your to-do list and sit and get on with them, because you haven't got the capacity to do it. So that's one of my offers. But then I have thrown myself back into my passion for performing arts, music. So I'm doing lots of freelance work. I'm doing piano lessons in schools. I've got a recorder group in schools, performing arts workshops. I've got lots of work through an amazing company called Rattle and Roll, who then employ freelancers to go into school to do music. I then trained to be a singing mama's leader, which is natural voice singing. It's all done in a circle. It's all very gentle. There's no judgment, no sheet music. It's just you learn by oral tradition. And the ethos behind it is for women's wellness, and especially perinatal mental health. So babies, children are welcome, but it can be women of all ages. So I launched that group just in half term. I've got my second session actually is tomorrow morning. That's really special. But as you can hear at the moment, it's quite varied because I didn't want to restrict myself, because I think one thing will really take off. I did apply to be a SIAMS inspector. So church schools have to have
Lovely.
a church inspection. And I've always been so passionate about that side of my work, but I didn't get accepted onto that. And it's weird, isn't it? I think some of us are that, oh, is that are not meant to be? I don't know. I'm not sure then that's supposed to be the field I work in. My husband would say that's me being silly and superstitious, but I don't know, sometimes you feel like a door opens really easily, and other times you kind of get that knock back and you think, oh, maybe that's not for me. But yeah, I would offer Christian distinctiveness consultancy. I love working with young leaders in schools. But yeah, my common theme is educating the heart and the mind. Yeah.
And you are
Yeah.
on Instagram, aren't you? And Facebook?
And Facebook, yeah. So on Facebook, it's just Emily Brown is my page. And yeah, Instagram, Emily Brown, Hearts and Minds. Yeah.
Oh, well, I will leave your details below, but just to
Thank
finish
you.
off, how is life after teaching?
I cannot tell you. I just feel like myself again. And I think teaching is a job where you are often having to put on an act, put on a brave face, pretend you know something even though you don't. You know, there's a lot of acting involved. And I think for the first time in a really long time, I feel lighter. I feel fun again. Um, yeah, I just do not carry this all around with me. I walk in, I do an amazing morning of piano lessons. I've been in 3 schools today. It's crazy on a Tuesday, but I've still got bags of energy. Whereas by now I'd have been drained. But yeah, life is light again and fun again. And I feel so in control, because if there was anything I wasn't really enjoying, I would just stop that aspect because I haven't got all my eggs in one basket. So yeah, life is really good. Yeah,
Oh,
really good.
oh, well, thank you very much for chatting to me. It's been an absolute pleasure. Like
Yeah,
I
you
said, I'll
too.
leave your details down below. And if you did like today's interview, please make sure to subscribe to see who else I'm chatting to. Thanks for watching.